"Excuse me, miss. Are you my mama?" The words struck Maya Williams like a whispered curse, delicate but devastating. She froze in place, the tray of wine glasses in her hand, suddenly weightless, her feet anchored to the marble floor of the Empire Hope Foundation gala. One glass tilted, catching a glint of chandelier light, before she caught it just in time. She looked down. A boy 6, maybe 7, stood at her side, his little fingers gripping the hem of her black service apron like he'd found a long-lost tether. He had fair skin, soft blonde hair, and eyes the color of new leaves in spring. And he was staring up at her like he had just found the entire universe. Maya bent slightly, her voice soft. "Sweetheart, I think you've made a mistake." "No," the boy said, shaking his head slowly. "You're my mama. I know you are." Before Maya could speak again, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms tightly around her waist. Hey," she whispered, eyes darting around the room. "Sweetheart, listen to me. I'm not your mama. I'm just helping out here tonight. Okay? You've got the wrong person." But the boy clung tighter. "You smell like her," he whispered, "and your voice, it's the same." Mama always hummed the song. Maya's heart skipped. The song? She hadn't sung to anyone in years. Her body froze as though the walls had tilted sideways. A few guests had stopped talking, eyes drifting toward the strange tableau at the center of the ballroom. Waitstaff paused mid-step. The soft classical music from the quartet thinned and faltered, and then came the voice, sharp, clipped, and unmistakably hostile. "Oliver, step away from that woman." A tall, sharply dressed man sliced through the crowd with cold precision. Edward Langston, billionaire tech mogul, founder of the Empire Hope Foundation, and by the sneer curling at the edge of his lips, a man very used to the world obeying his command. He stalked toward them, face flushed not with embarrassment, but fury. "Oliver," he barked again. "I said step away from her." The boy didn't move. "She's my mom." Maya tried to gently peel him off. "Sir, I don't know what's going on. He came to me. I tried to tell him." Edward's eyes narrowed, and then, with a thin smile, he looked her up and down. "Of course he did," he said coldly. "It's always the same trick, isn't it? Cling to a child, make a scene, and hope someone writes you a check." Maya blinked. "Excuse me? Don't play innocent. You people always know how to put on a show." Her breath caught. The words weren't just cruel, they were laced with a familiar disgust, sharpened by centuries of hierarchy. "I told him I wasn't his mother," Maya said firmly, her voice beginning to tremble. "He wouldn't let go." "No." Edward leaned down, ignoring her completely. "Oliver, let go of her, right now." "No," the boy shouted. "She's my mama, I know it." Edward's face contorted into something feral. "What did you tell him, huh?" he hissed at Maya. "You whisper something while carrying hors d'oeuvres? Or did he get confused because you share a skin tone with one of the nannies in his cartoons?" Maya's jaw clenched. "Sir, I haven't said a word to him. I don't care." Edward cut her off. "I'm not interested in your excuses, and I sure as hell don't want to hear your voice anymore." He reached forward to yank the boy away, but Oliver resisted. "Don't take me away from her," he sobbed. "Please." And then, just as suddenly, the little boy's body went limp. Maya caught him instinctively, the tray of glasses crashing to the floor in a symphony of broken crystal. She knelt, cradling his unconscious form. "Oh my God," she breathed, checking his pulse. "He fainted. Somebody call a doctor." Edward was already kneeling beside her, prying Oliver from her arms. "You've done enough," he growled. "Don't touch him again." "I didn't do anything, he just passed out." Edward turned on her like a storm. "Is that how you planned it? Make the boy collapse in front of everyone so we feel sorry for you?" He stood and gestured furiously. "Security, remove this woman. I want her out. Now." 2 security guards appeared from the ballroom's edge. Maya rose slowly, hands up. "I didn't hurt him," she said, pleading with anyone who would listen. "I didn't." "Shut up," Edward snapped. "Before you die yourself deeper. You're not even listening." "Exactly," he hissed. "Because your kind always talks when you should be quiet." The words struck like a slap, and Maya flinched. Security flanked her, guiding her away from the stunned ballroom. Guests whispered behind hands. Someone clicked a photo. Somewhere, a wine glass rolled in a circle on the marble, before coming to rest with a sigh. Outside, the February night slapped her face with cold wind. She stood under the flickering backlight of the hotel service entrance, her hands trembling, breath shallow. She had been humiliated, not just dismissed, silenced. "You're my mama." The words wouldn't leave her. The warmth of his arms, the way he clung, none of it made sense. And yet, none of it felt wrong. The kitchen door creaked open behind her. It was Tanya, her supervisor, holding Maya's coat. "You all right?" she asked gently. Maya didn't answer. "Edward Langston's known for hating surprises," Tanya added, "especially when they come in brown skin and a uniform." "I didn't even talk to that boy," Maya whispered. "I didn't do anything wrong. I know that. But in there?" Tanya sighed. "Truth doesn't matter. Image does." "Is the boy okay?" "Oliver?" "Paramedics said he was stable. They're taking him to Northwestern. Poor thing's been fragile ever since his mom died. Angela Cooper. Died 6 years ago. Brain aneurysm." Maya turned sharply. "Angela Cooper?" Tanya nodded. "You know her?" Maya didn't answer. She was already lost in the past, in a dorm room filled with laughter and tear-stained pillowcases, in a friendship that once meant everything. Angela. Her roommate. Her sister in spirit, gone without goodbye. And now her son, her only child, had called Maya, Mama. This wasn't over. Whatever had started tonight hadn't ended in that ballroom. It had only just begun. Oliver's screams still echoed in Maya's ears long after the ballroom doors slammed shut behind her. "Do you think Maya will take action? If yes, drop the number 1 inch the comments." Even now, standing under the yellow haze of a flickering street lamp beside the hotel's delivery entrance, she couldn't shake the weight of his tiny arms wrapped around her waist, the panic in his voice, the heartbreak when he cried out, "Mama." It had been too real, too raw, and that look in Edward Langston's eyes filled with contempt, fear, and something else she couldn't name still burned fresh in her chest like a wound. Maya sat on a cold metal bench in the alley behind the hotel, her coat wrapped tight around her body. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Probably Tanya, checking in again. Or worse, the agency, firing her without explanation. Wouldn't be the first time someone like Edward Langston made a phone call and ended a working woman's income with a single breath. She stared at her hands. They were still trembling. "You're my mama." The words weren't going away, not even after the cold, not even after the humiliation. That boy had meant it. It wasn't just some confused child latching onto a stranger. He'd looked at her like he knew her. But how? Angela Cooper had died 6 years ago. The news had broken Maya's heart all over again when Tanya said the name out loud. She'd spent years wondering what happened to her best friend. Letters stopped. Emails bounced back. One day Angela was there, messy-haired, brilliant, opinionated Angela, and the next, gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Until tonight. And now her son had called Maya Mama. Maya Williams? A woman's voice snapped her out of her spiraling thoughts. She looked up. A tall blonde in a navy blue pantsuit stepped into the alley, heels clicking like gunshots against the concrete. Her expression was polished, unreadable. Next to her stood a man in a headset, clearly hotel security. Maya stood cautiously. "Yes? I'm Violet Durham," the woman said, pulling a small leather folder from her coat. "I'm legal counsel for Mr. Edward Langston." Maya stiffened. "You're here on his behalf?" "Not exactly," Violet replied coolly. "I'm here to prevent further escalation." She handed Maya a paper. "This is a formal trespassing notice. You are not to return to any Langston Foundation property, including this hotel, or attempt to make contact with Mr. Langston or his son again." "Oh." Maya stared at the paper. "He thinks I'm some kind of threat?" "You caused an incident at a high-profile charity gala," Violet said, almost clinically. "The press is already asking questions. Mr. Langston would prefer to avoid any scandal." "I didn't cause anything," Maya shot back. "Your boss's son ran up to me. He said I was his mother. I didn't even speak to him before that." Violet raised a brow. "Children say many things. He fainted in my arms. Does that sound like a child making up stories?" "Miss Williams," Violet said, lowering her voice, "I understand this is emotional for you. but I strongly recommend you take the evening to reflect and leave this alone. Maya's voice turned low, dangerous. What exactly are you afraid I'll uncover? The other woman blinked. Excuse me? You showed up fast. Which means Edward Langston is worried. And that means something about what happened in there tonight wasn't a coincidence. Oh, Violet took a careful breath. This isn't personal. It is to that little boy. Violet hesitated for a second, just a second, but then tucked the folder back into her coat. Have a good evening, Miss Williams. They turned and left. Maya clutched the paper in her hand until it wrinkled. It didn't matter. She wasn't walking away from this. You're my mama. I know you are. If Angela had a son, and if that son believed Maya was his mother, then something in the past wasn't as buried as they wanted it to be. Her fingers went to the broken watch on her wrist. It had stopped ticking the same day she lost her own daughter. The memory punched her in the gut like it always did. The hospital lights. The beeping machines. The nurse apologizing as if words could fix it. Her daughter had only lived 43 hours. Angela had been the only person who showed up at the funeral. And now, Angela's child thought Maya was his mom? No. It was time for answers. The next morning, Maya found herself in the quietest wing of the public library on Dearborn Street. She hadn't slept, she'd barely eaten, but her mind was awake, alive with suspicion, memory, and grief tangled into one giant knot. Angela Cooper. She typed the name into the archive computer. Obituary listings, Foundation press releases, medical journals. And then she found it. Angela Cooper Langston. There was a wedding announcement 6.5 years ago. Married Edward Langston quietly in Vienna. Vienna? Another search brought up a birth certificate. Oliver James Langston. Born 5 years ago. That didn't add up. Angela had died 6 years ago, right? No. Wait. The obituary didn't list a date. It was a memorial notice. No confirmed cause of death. Just a tribute. A placeholder. And suddenly Maya understood. Angela hadn't died. She'd been erased. Later that day, Maya sat on the L train, clutching printed copies of the articles, photos, and registry documents she'd found. She watched the blur of the city whip past the window-gray buildings, tired people, snow turning to sludge at the corners of every street. She dialed a number she hadn't called in years. A woman's voice answered on the third ring. Hello? Miss Holloway? It's Maya. Maya Williams. Maya, oh Lord, child, it's been years. I need to talk to you. It's about Angela. There was a long pause on the other end. Then the voice returned, older, quieter. I was wondering when someone would come asking about her. Maya's breath caught. So you know something. I know plenty. But you gotta come see me face to face. Some things don't belong on the phone. I'll be there tonight. She hung up, her pulse pounding. She didn't know where this road was leading, but for the first time in 6 years, it felt like she was finally walking toward the truth. The snow had started to fall again by the time Maya reached the old brick row house on the south side. It stood on a quiet corner, its porch light flickering, stubborn against the gray dusk that crept over Chicago like a heavy blanket. The wind bit at her cheeks, but she hardly noticed. Her mind was running hot, too many questions, not enough answers. She hesitated at the rusted gate, one hand on the latch, the other clutching a folder thick with printed articles and clippings. The name Angela Langston was circled over and over again in red pen. It didn't make sense. Nothing did. She rang the bell. Footsteps shuffled behind the door. Then it creaked open. Miss Holloway? Maya asked. The woman before her looked much older than she remembered. Thin white hair pulled back into a scarf, lines etched deep into her mahogany skin. But those eyes were still sharp. Still watching. Lord, you grew into your mother's face, Miss Holloway said, her voice soft but steady. Come in, girl. It's cold enough out there to freeze sin. Maya stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the scent of lavender and old books. The house hadn't changed. Lace curtains still hung in the windows, and ceramic angels crowded every shelf. A space frozen in time. Miss Holloway led her into the living room, where a single floor lamp cast a warm glow on a worn recliner and an old wood coffee table. She motioned for Maya to sit. Tea? She asked, already heading toward the kitchen. No, thank you, Maya said quietly. I need to ask you about Angela. Miss Holloway returned moments later, placing a steaming mug in front of her anyway. You said you know plenty. Please tell me what happened. The old woman settled into her chair, took a slow sip of tea, and exhaled. I remember the day she disappeared, she said. Just like I remember the day you and her used to come round this neighborhood, loud as sunshine. Angela was fire wild and bright and full of dreams. Maya nodded, her throat tight. She had that nursing scholarship, remember? Miss Holloway continued. Top of her class. Then poof, gone. No one knew where. I called every hospital in the city. Thought maybe she'd run off, but something didn't feel right. She told me she needed space, and vanished, Maya murmured. She never came back, never called. I thought, maybe something bad happened. Miss Holloway gave her a look. Something did happen. She met a man. Rich. Powerful. Thought he was Prince Charming. But it was a snake in a suit. Maya's heart dropped. Edward Langston. The old woman's jaw tightened. That's the one. She showed up 6 months after disappearing. Said she was living in Europe. Vienna. Pregnant. Quiet as a whisper. Like she was scared of being followed. She came to say goodbye. I begged her to stay. But she said it was already too late. She told you she was pregnant? Maya asked, voice sharp with urgency. Yes, said the baby wasn't safe here. Said she was being watched, controlled, that Langston didn't want anyone from her old life involved. Miss Holloway's hands trembled slightly. She looked so tired, Maya, like her light was fading. Did she say anything else? About the child? She said if anything ever happened to her, there was only one person she trusted to raise that boy. Maya's breath caught. She said your name, Miss Holloway whispered. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya's hands clutched her coat, knuckles pale. He never told anyone. He never even listed her death publicly. Just had her disappear. He has the money to rewrite truth, Miss Holloway said. He's got power in all the places that matter, press, courts, doctors. Maya stood, the room spinning slightly. She left that boy with a man who hated her past. Who hated me the moment he saw me. Because you remind him of what he tried to bury, the old woman said, her voice shaking now. Your skin, your history, your connection to her. You're the ghost he's been running from. Maya turned to the window, watching the snow settle on the railing outside. Oliver called me Mama. It wasn't confusion. It was something deeper. I saw it in his eyes. He knew me. Miss Holloway rose slowly, walked over to a narrow cabinet, and pulled out a small wooden box. She opened it and handed Maya an old envelope. What is this? Maya asked. It's the last letter Angela wrote before she left the country. She mailed it from the airport. I never gave it to anyone, not even the police. Maya opened the envelope with shaking hands. The handwriting was unmistakable. Maya, if you ever receive this, it means I didn't make it back. I know I don't deserve forgiveness for leaving without saying goodbye. But I didn't want to put you in danger. Ed. He's not who he pretended to be. I thought I could handle it. I was wrong. If anything happens to me, please protect my son. His name is Oliver. He has your eyes. I told him stories about you when he was still in my belly. Maybe that's why he'll know you when he sees you. You were always my strength. Love always. Angela. Maya's tears spilled silently onto the page, her hand pressed over her mouth. Oliver knew her. Somehow, in that mysterious way children remember what adults forget. He knew her. And now she knew the truth. Angela had tried to shield her son from Edward. But now Edward had complete control, and he hated everything Angela came from. He'd erased her, rewritten her history, locked that boy in a world of crystal chandeliers and icy obedience. Maya folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. She turned to Miss Holloway, her voice steady now. I need to see him again. You'll have to fight, the old woman warned. He'll come after you. Then let him. Miss Holloway looked at her, long and deep, and nodded once. Just like your mama, she said. The front gates of the Langston estate loomed like iron arms folded in judgment. Maya sat in her car across the street, engine off, headlights dimmed, watching the mansion through falling snow. The estate stretched out over 2 manicured acres of frozen lawn, wrapped in a perimeter of brick and camera-eyed metal fencing. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress designed to keep people out. Or maybe to keep someone in. She hadn't come to start trouble. Not yet. She came to see the truth with her own eyes. Her fingers trembled as she opened Angela's letter again. She didn't need to read the words. She'd already memorized them. My son has your eyes. Maya had gone over every detail in her head during the drive here. The timeline. The silence. The child. Angela hadn't vanished. She'd been silenced. And Edward Langston, the grieving widower billionaire, hadn't just taken her child. He'd hidden the truth behind wealth, media charm, and cold-hearted control. And now, that child, a boy with Angela's soul in Maya's eyes, was locked behind those gates. She stared at the estate. Somewhere in there, Oliver was waking up, maybe frightened, maybe asking for a woman he wasn't supposed to remember. The passenger door creaked open. Maya jumped. It was Tanya. Damn, you almost gave me a heart attack, Maya hissed, hand flying to her chest. You said meet you here, didn't you? Tanya said, sliding into the seat. And for the record, I've seen you look determined before, but this is something else. Maya gave a weary smile. Thanks for coming. Migri. You better thank me later, Tanya muttered. I'm risking my job just being near this place. If Langston's people see me, they won't. I just need to know, did you find anything from the gala last night? Tanya pulled out a flash drive from her coat. Security footage, from the service hallway, just before the incident. You got the tapes? Friend in IT owed me a favor, but it's risky. He said Langston's people already scrubbed the public-facing cameras. This is raw backup, time-stamped, unedited. Maya's throat tightened. Thank you. Tanya paused. You sure about this? Going after a man like Edward Langston? I'm not going after him, Maya said. I'm protecting Oliver. Tanya nodded slowly. I saw how that boy clung to you. That wasn't confusion. That was instinct. Maya gripped the steering wheel. I need to know he's safe. Then you better be smart. Langston has people in the mayor's office, the press, the damn hospital board. Maya's gaze returned to the estate. Let him have the city. I just need one moment with that boy. One moment to prove he remembers. Tanya hesitated. You might not get that chance. Rumor is, Langston's shipping the kid off. What? Private school in Switzerland. Staff-only access. Media blackout. I heard it from a caterer who also works his holiday events. The arrangements are happening fast. Maya's stomach turned. He's trying to erase him too. Or at least isolate him. That boy clung to you in a room full of strangers. Langston's scared. He doesn't want him near anyone who might trigger more memories. Maya's heart pounded. Then I'm out of time. She opened the glove compartment and pulled out a small leather-bound notebook. Inside were notes. Timelines. Contact names. She flipped to the last page and handed it to Tanya. What's this? Tanya asked. A list of people who knew Angela. Her professors. Our old roommate in Hyde Park. A nurse I think helped deliver Oliver in Vienna. I need you to help me verify them. You're planning something. Maya nodded. A custody claim. Tanya's eyes widened. You don't even have proof you're related. I don't need to be his biological mother to be the only person who gives a damn about him. But if I can prove Angela intended for me to be his guardian, and that Langston manipulated the narrative of her disappearance. That's a war, Tanya whispered. I know, Maya said, and I'm walking into it. A pair of headlights turned down the estate driveway. A black SUV approached the gate, the security scanner buzzing as the vehicle passed through. Tanya watched it disappear behind the hedges. That's probably Edward heading out. Maya opened her door and stepped out into the cold. Then I've got 20 minutes. What are you doing? Going to see him. Just for a second. Are you insane? Maya gave a small smile. Only a little. No. Inside the estate, Oliver sat in a sunlit room that looked like it belonged to a magazine cover. White walls, silver furniture, $1,000 toy chest that hadn't been touched. A nurse with perfect posture hovered nearby, scribbling on a chart. A bodyguard stood by the door. The boy's eyes, once filled with defiance and wonder, now looked far away. Would you like to go outside for a bit? The nurse asked. Oliver shook his head. Would you like to call your father? He shook his head again. Would you like a story? He looked up. Do you know the song? The nurse blinked. What song? The one Mama used to sing. The hum song. The nurse tilted her head. Your mother passed away, sweetheart. Oliver's voice dropped to a whisper. That wasn't her. That was a story. The nurse stared at him, clearly unsure what to say. Oliver returned to staring out the window. He didn't know how he knew, or why it hurt so much. But the woman in the black apron, he'd known her, the way her voice made the air feel safe, the way her arms held him like she'd done it 1,000 times. She was home, even if no one else believed it. And somewhere on the other side of the walls, he knew she hadn't left him. She was still coming. Maya crouched behind a line of tall hedges, heart pounding with every second that ticked by. The back entrance to the Langston estate loomed just 30 feet away, a quiet service gate used for maintenance staff and deliveries. She'd timed everything. Edward Langston's SUV had pulled out 10 minutes ago. The rotating guard had just passed the west perimeter, and the estate's high-end security system was programmed to reset during shift changes. She had a 5-minute window. Her breath clouded in the frozen air as she rose and made her way across the snow-covered lawn. Her black coat blended into the twilight shadows. With every step, her mind raced, not just with fear of getting caught, but with one persistent, burning thought. Oliver remembers me. I need to prove it to him. I need him to know he's not alone. The back gate buzzed faintly when she touched the electronic panel. She'd watched the gardener punch in the code that morning from across the street. 1946, Angela's birth year. It worked. Inside, the estate was even more overwhelming than she remembered. The polished stone floors, the gleaming banisters, the oil paintings of men who never smiled. Every inch of the place screamed power, control, silence. She crept down the back corridor toward the eastern wing, clutching the flash drive Tanya had given her in one coat pocket and Angela's letter in the other. A door creaked in the hallway ahead, and Maya ducked behind a large marble column. A housekeeper passed by, humming softly, unaware. Maya turned down a narrower hallway and saw it, the nursery wing. She'd learned its location from an article in a luxury design magazine. The Langston heirs' room was how it was described, complete with hand-carved molding, imported rugs, and a wall of interactive touchscreens. But none of that mattered. She just needed to see him, just for a moment. The hallway was empty. At the far end, she saw the door with the brass nameplate. Oliver. She approached quietly, her gloved hand hovering near the handle. She didn't know what she was going to say. She just knew she couldn't walk away, not while that child was locked in this mansion like a trophy. Then, just as she reached for the door, it opened from the inside. Oliver stood there in flannel pajamas, his hair slightly tousled, a half-finished drawing in one hand. They stared at each other. His eyes lit up instantly. "Mama!" Maya dropped to her knees as he ran into her arms. This time, she didn't hesitate. She held him, tears stinging her eyes as his little hands clutched at her neck, like he feared she'd disappear again. "I knew you'd come," he whispered. "I'm here," she said softly, stroking his back. "I'm so sorry I didn't come sooner." Oliver pulled back just enough to look at her. "They said you were gone, but I remembered. The song you used to hum." Maya blinked. "The hum song?" He nodded eagerly. "When I was in your belly, I remembered it." "No." A sob caught in her throat. Angela must have sung it while she was pregnant, and she must have told Oliver stories about Maya. "I don't want to be here anymore," he said. "It's cold, even when the heat is on." She kissed his forehead. "I'm going to fix that, baby, I promise. But I need you to listen very carefully, okay?" He nodded solemnly. Maya reached into her coat and pulled out a small button-sized microphone. "Can you keep a secret?" He nodded again. "I'm going to ask you some questions. Just talk like you always do, all right?" She activated the mic and spoke gently. "Do you remember your real mom?" He nodded. "Her name was Angela. She was pretty. Like you. She had the same eyes. She used to say we were both made of stars." Maya swallowed hard. "Did she ever tell you about me?" "Uh-huh," he said. "She said if she didn't come back, someone named Maya would, and I'd be safe with her." Do you know who your dad is?" Oliver hesitated, then nodded. "Edward. But he doesn't like me talking about Mama." "What happens when you do?" Oliver looked down. "He gets mad, real quiet mad. He makes the nurse take my drawings. He says I'm imagining things that don't help me." Maya gritted her teeth. That was psychological conditioning, isolating, silencing, reshaping a child's memory. She whispered, Do you want to stay here? No, he said quickly. I want to come with you. Maya hugged him tight again. I'm going to make that happen. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed down the hall. Oliver gasped. It's Mr. Bennett, the head guard. He always comes when it's quiet. Maya stood, scooping him into her arms. It's okay. Stay quiet. She slipped into the room and closed the door softly behind her, just as the hallway lights brightened. From the shadows behind a thick curtain, she peered out. A large man in a black suit passed by, pausing at the door for a moment. Maya held her breath, but he didn't knock. He kept walking. She exhaled slowly. Then, from inside Oliver's closet, a chime beeped softly, an intercom notification. The house was going into night mode. That meant automatic locks, motion sensors, timers. She didn't have much time. She knelt beside Oliver, pressing the tiny mic into his palm. Keep this hidden, okay? If anything happens, just press here. She pointed. And say, Mama knows. I'll hear you. Oliver's eyes welled with tears. Will you come back? I promise. But first, I need to talk to some people who can help us. You believe me, right? I always have. A knock sounded on the front door of the estate, deep, echoing through the walls. Maya flinched. It wasn't the security guard. It was the sound of someone official. She kissed Oliver's forehead. Stay strong, baby. She slipped out through the hallway window, boots crunching softly in the snow as she disappeared into the dark, just as Edward Langston's voice bellowed through the foyer. Where is he? Maya didn't stop. Not this time. The next morning, the Langston estate was a hornet's nest. Edward Langston stood in the grand hallway, his eyes colder than the marble beneath his shoes. He was in a custom wool coat, unzipped, tie slightly askew, a rare hint that he'd been caught off balance. Check every door, he snapped to his security team. Every hallway. Every damn window. 2 guards nodded and rushed off. His legal counsel, Violet Durham, stood to his left, calm but clearly alarmed. The internal sensors registered motion near the east wing, but the cameras were oddly scrambled. Not down, just looped. Edward's jaw flexed. Somebody tampered with them? That's the theory, Violet said. I'll be reviewing the backups myself. He turned toward the main staircase. Where is my son? In his room, sir. The head nurse answered quickly. He's unharmed. But he was awake at 3:12 a.m., crying. He refused to say what happened. Edward's eyes narrowed. Refused? Or instructed? Excuse me? The nurse stammered. He ignored her, striding up the stairs 2 at a time. He found Oliver seated on his bed, legs pulled to his chest, crayon drawings scattered on the comforter. The boy didn't look scared, he looked defiant, quietly burning. Edward stopped in the doorway. Who came into your room last night? Oliver looked up, but said nothing. I'm not asking twice. The boy blinked. No one came. You're lying, Edward said sharply. I know someone was here. Oliver tilted his head. Are you mad because I remembered her? Edward froze. I remembered her eyes, Oliver whispered. She sang the song. Stop it, Edward growled. That woman is not your mother. You don't know what she is, Oliver said softly. You only know how to lie. Edward crossed the room in 2 long strides, towering over him. You will forget her, he said coldly. You will not speak of her again. You are a Langston, and Langstons don't dwell in fantasy. Oliver looked up, voice barely above a whisper. Mama knows. Edward's brows furrowed. What? But the boy only shrugged, picking up a green crayon and returning to his drawing as if the conversation never happened. Edward stood there a moment longer, jaw tight. Then he turned and stormed out, barking orders. Seal every archive. Sweep all staff communication. I want that woman found. I want every piece of surveillance pulled within a 10-block radius. Violet followed closely. Sir, might I suggest we step carefully here? If this escalates publicly? Edward spun. It won't, because we'll kill it before it breathes. Meanwhile, across the city, Maya sat at a small round table in a legal aid office, her fingers wrapped tightly around a styrofoam cup of bad coffee. The walls were lined with yellowing folders and forgotten diplomas. Across from her sat David Sherman, a former civil rights attorney turned quiet champion of forgotten custody cases. He skimmed Angela's letter and the printed birth records. You understand this is going to be very difficult. I know, Maya said, but she named me as Oliver's guardian if anything happened to her. I have her letter. I have statements from people who knew us both. That boy remembers me. David leaned back. Langston's team will argue that this was a private agreement with no legal standing. And since Angela never formally filed guardianship paperwork, it'll be your word against his empire. I don't care how hard it is, Maya said. I care that Angela's son is being raised by a man who erased her. David sighed, pushing the papers into a tidy stack. If we go forward, it'll have to be a petition for emergency guardianship with supporting affidavits. We'll need more witnesses, records, photos, anything proving your relationship to Angela and her intent. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out the flash drive. What's this? Footage from the gala, security tape. It shows Oliver running to me, calling me mama, crying, clinging, all before I said a word. David raised an eyebrow. Well, that's a start. By late afternoon, Maya stood at the community center where Angela used to volunteer back before Vienna. Before Edward Langston. Before everything went quiet. She entered the narrow hallway and was greeted by a short woman with braided hair and a clipboard. Excuse me, Maya said, her voice tentative. Do you remember a woman named Angela Cooper? The woman looked up, paused, and then smiled softly. Sure do. Fierce little thing. Used to run the teen mentorship program. Loved painting with the kids. Maya exhaled. I'm trying to prove she left her son in my care, unofficially. I was her best friend. The woman's expression changed. You're Maya? Yes. She nodded. Come with me. They walked to a back room filled with old supply cabinets and bulletin boards. She pulled open a drawer and handed Maya a photo album. Page after page of faded pictures. Angela and Maya with children, teaching, laughing, painting murals. And then, in the last sleeve, a photo. Angela holding a newborn in a hospital bed, with Maya sitting beside her, teary-eyed, holding the baby's hand. This, Maya whispered, this is everything. I remember that day, the woman said. Angela said, if anything happens to me, this child belongs to Maya more than anyone. Tears slipped down Maya's cheeks. Would you be willing to write that in a statement? I'll do you one better, the woman replied. I'll testify in court. Maya's chest tightened with a strange mix of hope and fear. The tides were shifting. The storm hadn't passed, but for the first time, she could feel the wind on her back. Oliver was waiting, and she wasn't leaving him behind again. Edward Langston paced the marble floors of his private office, an untouched glass of scotch sweating on the table beside him. The fireplace crackled softly, but it did little to thaw the ice settling into his spine. His empire was built on image, control, and silence, and now, all three were slipping. He held the flash drive in his hand, the one retrieved from a compromised server, thanks to an anonymous tip that Maya had shared the gala footage with a civil rights attorney. Violet had warned him, if this goes public, we lose control of the narrative. Narrative. That word meant everything to Edward. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a brand, a legacy, a Langston. And yet, here she was. Maya Williams, a maid turned ghost from Angela's past, clawing at the gates of his world with nothing but a letter and a child's memory. He pressed play on the security clip for the third time. There it was again. The ballroom. The moment Oliver spotted her, the way he screamed, ran, threw himself into her arms. The panic, the tears, the word that echoed louder than the music. Mama? Edward's jaw clenched. His eyes narrowed. The child had inherited more than Angela's curls. He'd inherited her stubbornness, her defiance, her memory. And now that memory had become dangerous. Violet entered without knocking, tablet in hand. Sir, we have a situation. What kind? She's filed an emergency guardianship petition with supporting affidavits. His head snapped up. On what grounds? Emotional attachment, prior relationship with the biological mother, written testimony, volunteer records, even photographs from the delivery room. Nah. He stood, his voice low and furious. I want to cease and desist on every platform, silence the media, threaten the legal aid office with slander. Violet didn't blink. They've already secured a temporary hearing, 3 days from now. He stared at her. You let it get this far? She's smart, Violet said quietly. And the people around her are loyal. We underestimated her reach. Edward crossed to the window and stared out at the city he practically owned. Then we'll make her disappear again. Sir, you heard me, he snapped. Not physically, legally. We dig into her past. Every job, every unpaid bill, every name she's ever gone by. We paint her as unstable, desperate, unfit. Violet hesitated. There's a child involved. There's my child involved, he growled. And I will not have him raised by someone who still smells like bleach and humility. Silence stretched between them. Sir, Violet said carefully. What if the court sides with her? They won't. And if they do? Edward turned slowly. Then the court won't survive it. Elsewhere in the city, Maya sat with David Sherman and a young, fast-talking paralegal named Julian, poring over a mountain of paperwork inside a cramped office. They had 3 days, maybe less. Julian slid a new folder across the table. Got a list of terminated employees from Langston's household staff over the past 5 years. 3 of them are willing to talk confidentially. One of them said Angela didn't just vanish. She was pushed out. Maya leaned forward. Do they have proof? Not physical, Julian admitted. But they all said the same thing: Angela wanted out, and Edward wouldn't let her take the boy. She was isolated, medicated, monitored. David rubbed his temples. If we can corroborate coercion or emotional abuse, it supports the claim that Angela left instructions for alternative guardianship. Oh, Maya reached for a photo her and Angela. Arm in arm, smiles real and young. With a mural in the background that read, Lift every voice. She didn't leave Oliver behind, Maya said quietly. She was trapped. Julian nodded. And now her son is too. David tapped the court file. Langston's lawyers filed an early response. They're claiming you're emotionally unstable, financially incapable, and seeking notoriety. Maya laughed bitterly. They think I want attention? They're throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks, David said. I don't need their money, Maya said. I just need him to be safe. David looked up, voice low. You're going to be under a microscope, Maya. They'll dig up everything. Relationships, work history, even medical records. She nodded. Let them. Julian looked at her. You don't seem scared. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I'm done hiding. Angela tried to protect that boy, and she died in silence. I won't do the same. Later that night, Oliver sat in his room, humming softly under his breath. The melody, the hum song, filled the space like a prayer. He held a small plush elephant close to his chest. Its ear was worn from years of clutching. His nurse had offered to replace it, but he refused. He closed his eyes and whispered, Mama knows. He didn't know where she was, or when she was coming, but something inside told him she was close. Have felt it, and in a home full of voices telling him to forget, he clung tightly to the one that told him to remember. Edward Langston's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He answered without looking. What? She's not backing down, Violet said from the other end. Her legal team is growing. Public sympathy is shifting. She has no case. She has the boy. Edward's silence lingered. Then came his answer. Then we move him. Tonight. The Langston estate was silent, blanketed in the stillness that only the dead of night could offer. But beneath that silence, gears were turning. Plans were in motion. And at the center of it all, little Oliver Langston lay fast asleep, unaware that his world was about to shift again. Edward stood in the hallway, flanked by 2 private security operatives dressed in civilian coats but wired with earpieces and quiet aggression. He checked his Rolex. 2:17 a.m., right on schedule. The vehicle's ready, the taller guard said. Jet's on standby. Zurich can take him within the week. But he'll be in holding at a secure boarding estate outside Boston for now. Off-grid. No press. No leaks. Edward gave a curt nod. He glanced at the small duffel bag resting by the bedroom door, already packed by the housekeeper earlier that day under strict orders. No toys, no personal effects. Everything about Oliver's past, every comfort, every connection was to be left behind. Clean slate. Clean silence. But something didn't sit right. Edward didn't understand it, not fully. But that boy had begun to look at him differently since the gala. Not with fear, not even with anger, with clarity, with the eyes of his mother. Angela had always had that look. The one that pierced through the layers of wealth and charm and saw the man underneath. The man who didn't like being seen. "Wake the boy," he said flatly. The nurse entered, flicking on the low lamp and gently shaking Oliver's shoulder. "Oliver, sweetheart, time to wake up." He stirred slowly, rubbing his eyes. "What time is it?" "It's early," she said gently. "We're going on a little trip." Oliver blinked. "Where's Maya?" "She's not coming," Edward said from the doorway. Oliver froze. Then he sat up. "I don't want to go." "This isn't a choice," Edward replied, stepping into the room. "I don't want to go," the boy shouted, panic rising in his voice. The nurse tried to soothe him, but he pulled away. "You said she wasn't my mom, but you lied." She knew the song. She knew about the elephant. She knew me. Edward's voice turned cold. "Enough. She said she'd come back," Oliver said through tears. "She promised." Edward turned to the guards. "Take him." As they moved toward the bed, Oliver kicked and screamed, wrapping his arms around the headboard. "No, I want Maya. I want my real mama." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, maybe." "Do it," Edward ordered. One of the guards reached for the child. Then, crash. A window shattered down the hall. The alarm didn't go off. A blackout had been triggered. The emergency lights blinked on, casting the hallway in eerie red hues. One of the guards spoke into his mic. "We've got a breach. Repeat breach on the west side." Edward's face darkened. "She's here." "No." Maya crouched in the narrow utility corridor, heart pounding, flashlight clenched between her teeth as she moved through the wiring panel she'd learned about from Tanya's contact. She'd studied the estate's layout for days. She knew exactly how to disable the system for 3 minutes, just enough time to slip through. 3 minutes to save a life. She reached the nursery hallway just as the 2 guards stepped out, weapons drawn, eyes scanning. "Check the main entrance. Sweep the perimeter." She ducked behind the pillar and held her breath as they passed. Then she moved. She slipped into the nursery. Oliver was curled up on the floor, hands over his ears, the nurse standing helplessly above him. "Maya?" he whispered, voice muffled. She knelt beside him instantly. I'm here, baby." He launched into her arms, sobbing against her chest. "I told you I'd come back," she whispered, "and I'm not leaving without you." The nurse looked startled but not hostile. "You can't be here, he's being relocated." "By force," Maya said, standing and clutching Oliver tightly. "Against court order. No court's given custody yet." "Not yet," Maya said, "but that doesn't give him the right to disappear this child in the middle of the night." The nurse swallowed. I'm supposed to." "You're supposed to care," Maya interrupted softly. "Do you?" The woman hesitated, then she nodded once. "Stairwell behind the linen closet. Leads to the lower staff exit. If you leave now, you've got a shot." Maya squeezed her hand. "Thank you." She wrapped Oliver in a blanket, held him tight, and moved swiftly through the corridor. Outside, the snow was falling again, soft and blinding. But she didn't stop. She pushed through the gates, slipped through the same gardener's entrance she'd used before, and made it to Tanya's idling car at the curb. Tanya flung the door open. "You got him?" "Drive," Maya said, sliding into the back seat with Oliver in her arms. As the car pulled away, Oliver looked up at her with tear-streaked cheeks. "Where are we going?" "Someplace safe," Maya whispered, "and somewhere no one will take you away again." He nodded slowly. Then he reached into his pajama pocket. "What's that?" she asked. He held up the tiny mic Maya had given him days before. "I pressed it," he said quietly. "Before they came, I said, 'Mama knows.'" Maya stared at him, stunned. "You heard me?" "No," she whispered, taking the mic and holding it tightly. "You heard me, even when I wasn't there." She kissed his forehead and wrapped him tighter in her arms as the city lights faded behind them. The war had begun, but she had him now, and she wasn't backing down. 3 days later, Maya stood in the chilly hallway of the Chicago family courthouse, her palms damp despite the cold. She wore a borrowed blazer 2 sizes too large and held tightly to a worn leather folder containing every shred of proof, every statement, every tear-stained photo that brought her to this moment. Inside the courtroom, A judge with a hard-lined face and a clockwork schedule prepared to open what should have been a quiet custody hearing. Except nothing about this case was quiet anymore. The story had leaked, and while Edward Langston's PR team scrambled to reframe the narrative, painting Maya as an unstable outsider and branding Oliver as a sensitive child in need of structure, the public wasn't buying it. The gala footage had made its way online. A nameless guest had uploaded a blurry, shaky video. A little boy running through a crowded ballroom and screaming "Mama" as he collapsed into the arms of a black woman no one recognized. That woman was now front-page news. "Maya," David Sherman said, walking up beside her. "You ready?" "No," she said honestly, "but I'm going in anyway." He gave her a nod of quiet respect. They stepped through the heavy double doors together. Inside, the air was dry and still. Maya took a seat at the petitioner's table, her heart racing. Edward Langston sat on the opposite side, flanked by 3 attorneys in $1,000 suits. He wore a charcoal gray jacket and a bored expression, as if he were there to dispute a parking violation. But his eyes locked on Maya with a quiet fury, a fury masked by charm, wrapped in privilege. She met his gaze, unflinching. The judge, Honorable Cynthia Reardon, entered and sat behind the bench. "We are here to hear emergency guardianship arguments in the matter of Oliver James Langston, minor, currently under the guardianship of Mr. Edward Langston. Miss Maya Williams is the petitioner." David stood. "Your Honor, we intend to present testimony and evidence that Oliver Langston has been unlawfully isolated, and that the petitioner was named as guardian in the event of Angela Cooper's death, the child's biological mother." Edward's lead attorney rose. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss. The petitioner has no biological claim, no legal paperwork filed prior to the mother's passing, and a history of employment in unstable domestic roles." Maya's jaw clenched. David replied, "We have letters, recorded interviews, and eyewitness statements confirming Miss Cooper's intentions. We have video evidence of Oliver identifying Miss Williams as a maternal figure, uncoached, unprovoked. Additionally, we submit to the court a sworn affidavit from a former Langston employee who witnessed coercive control over Miss Cooper during her final months." Judge Reardon lifted her glasses slightly. "You're saying the boy recognized the petitioner without being prompted?" "Yes, Your Honor. We have footage of the gala, taken by a third party." A court clerk played the video. The room fell silent as Oliver's voice echoed through the speakers. "Mama." The image was shaky but unmistakable. The boy's face, his tears, the desperate way he ran. When the lights returned, Maya wasn't the only one wiping at her eyes. The judge nodded. "We'll hear from the petitioner directly." Maya stood. Her knees trembled, but her voice held. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here to ruin anyone's reputation. I'm here because a little boy remembered me when no one else would believe him." She paused. "Angela Cooper wasn't just my friend. She was my family. She asked me to protect her son if anything ever happened to her. I didn't have lawyers, or money, or a plan. I just had that promise." Her voice cracked. "When I saw Oliver that night, he looked at me like I'd finally come home. He held on to me like his world was breaking. And that wasn't confusion. That was memory." She looked at Edward. "I know who you are. I know how powerful you are. But I won't let that boy grow up thinking his mother abandoned him. I won't let him believe that love can be erased by silence and money." She sat down, her chest heaving. Judge Reardon turned to Edward's side. "Does the respondent wish to cross-examine?" Edward rose himself, against his attorney's advice. He approached the bench slowly. "Your Honor," he began, smooth as silk, "this woman is not Oliver's blood. She has no legal standing. She walked into my home uninvited. She traumatized my son, and now, she's using emotion to manipulate this court." Maya stared, stunned by his calm, calculated performance. "I am the only parent Oliver has ever known. I provide for him, protect him, love him." He looked directly at the judge. "She is trying to steal my child." Judge Reardon raised a brow. "And yet the child ran to her, sir, called her Mama. You're asking this court to disregard the most honest testimony of all the child's own voice." Edward's lips thinned. She held up a file. "I will take the next 72 hours to review this material. In the meantime, I am issuing a temporary stay on Oliver's relocation. The child will remain within state limits and under supervised care." No out-of-country transfer will be permitted until this case is resolved. She banged the gavel. Court adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the wind was biting. Maya stepped onto the sidewalk, heart still pounding. David turned to her. We bought time. She looked out across the plaza, where journalists were gathering behind yellow tape, cameras rolling. She won't let him vanish, Maya whispered. Not this time. From a distance, Edward stood behind his town car, his jaw set in silent fury. He didn't look at her, he didn't have to, but Maya knew. He was already planning his next move. The snow fell heavier that night, blanketing the city in soft silence. But inside a high-rise office tower overlooking Lake Michigan, a storm was brewing. Edward Langston stood at the center of his private conference room, a wall of windows behind him, skyline lights flickering like distant stars. On the long table lay a dozen red folders, each one a different file, background checks, surveillance reports, financial forensics, all targeting one woman, Maya Williams. He didn't pace. He didn't shout. He simply stared at the image projected on the far wall, an old photograph of Maya and Angela, young and radiant, arms around each other outside the Southside Community Center. She was always a shadow, Edward said quietly. She wasn't supposed to fight this hard. Violet Durham stood beside him, arms folded, her face unreadable. That shadow has cornered you in federal court and made you trend on Twitter. She had help, Edward muttered. No maid figures out a courtroom strategy overnight. She's not a maid anymore. He turned slowly to face her. What are you saying? I'm saying, if you keep pushing, we may lose control entirely. Violet moved to the table and slid one of the folders toward him. And you won't like what happens when the court starts asking real questions about Angela Cooper's disappearance. He narrowed his eyes. That was ruled accidental. Ruled, Violet repeated softly. Not proven. The room fell still. Edward's voice dropped to a hush. We kept that woman fed. Protected. She was nobody before I brought her into our home. And yet she died alone, Violet replied, with no obituary, no funeral, no investigation. Edward's knuckles whitened as he gripped the back of a leather chair. She knew too much, he finally whispered. About me, about my father, about the boy. You're not just fighting Maya, Violet said. You're fighting the ghost of every lie you buried. He exhaled through his nose. Then we bury one more. She studied him for a long moment. Careful, Edward. Even shadows cast evidence. No. Across town. Maya sat on a small fold-out cot in Tanya's spare room. Oliver curled beside her, fast asleep. His fingers clutched the hem of her sweatshirt like a lifeline. His breath was steady, peaceful, but Maya was wide awake. She clutched the file folder David had given her earlier that afternoon. Inside it was a single sheet of paper, a witness report from one of the Langston household staff, a kitchen maid, anonymous, but brave enough to speak. Miss Angela used to cry in the laundry room, whispering that she felt watched. She wasn't allowed outside alone anymore. Mr. Langston had taken her phone. She said, if something happens to me, it's because I stopped being useful. Maya closed her eyes, her chest tightening. God, Angela, what did he do to you? Her thoughts were interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. It was Tanya, holding 2 mugs of hot tea. You okay? She asked, stepping in. Maya took the tea, nodding faintly. I will be. Tanya sat beside her. I saw the court footage. You were amazing. Like, scary amazing. Maya let out a tired laugh. I don't feel amazing. I feel like a second away from falling apart. But you didn't, Tanya said. And that kid? He's never slept that hard since you got him back. Maya looked down at Oliver, her heart swelling. He's all that matters now. Tanya hesitated, then pulled something from her coat pocket, a flash drive. What's that? Maya asked. It came in the mail today. No return address. She handed it over. Maya plugged it into her laptop and opened the only file inside. It was a video. Grainy. Black and white. At first, it showed nothing more than a hallway long, polished, familiar. Then, Angela appeared. Alone. Dazed. She stepped into frame, clutching her side. Her blouse was torn. Her lips moved, but the footage had no sound. She stumbled forward. Then Edward Langston entered from the right. He grabbed her by the arm. She resisted. He shoved her back. The video cut. Maya gasped. "Oh my God," Tanya whispered. "It's dated 3 days before her death. Where did this come from?" "Don't know, but it's real." Maya closed the laptop slowly. "If we bring this to court, they'll crucify him," Tanya said. Maya stared ahead, her mind racing. "No," she murmured, "not just court." She picked up her phone. 30 minutes later, the anonymous Twitter account at Cooper Truth posted a 45-second clip with no caption, no commentary, just evidence. Within 10 minutes, it had 12,000 views. Within an hour, it had 50,000. By morning, it would be on every major network in the country. Back at the high-rise, Edward's phone buzzed at 2:43 a.m. He woke to Violet's voice, tired, grim. "You need to see this." The link was already in his inbox. He opened it. There she was. Angela, bleeding, afraid, and then him, caught in the act. Edward stood in the dark, chest heaving, the glow of his screen bathing his face in cold blue light. He didn't scream, didn't curse. He simply whispered, "She wants war." And he knew Maya wasn't just fighting for Oliver anymore. She was fighting for the truth. And she wasn't alone. By sunrise, the storm had officially broken. Across newsrooms, courtrooms, and social media feeds, a single name resurfaced with a vengeance. Angela Cooper, the late mother of Oliver Langston, the woman whose disappearance had been quietly glossed over, quietly buried, until now. The surveillance clip had gone viral. News anchors played it on repeat. Voiceovers heavy with disbelief. Angela Cooper, once a domestic employee for billionaire Edward Langston, appears visibly distressed in this leaked footage dated 3 days before her death. Langston, long suspected by activist groups of workplace abuses, now faces renewed scrutiny as the legal battle over his son intensifies. No. Petitioner Maya Williams, once a maid in the Langston household, has emerged as a central witness and guardian figure in what some are calling the silent custody war of the decade. But inside Edward's mansion, silence reigned. Until it didn't. He hurled the tablet across the room. It struck the bookshelf, shattering like his self-control. "You said it was gone," Edward growled, turning to Violet, who stood motionless by the grand fireplace. "It was," she replied. "That drive was destroyed with the others." "Clearly it wasn't." She paused. "Someone made a copy. Someone inside." He moved toward her, slowly. "Then find them. I don't care what it costs." But Violet didn't flinch. "It's not about cost anymore. It's about consequence." Edward narrowed his eyes. "What are you implying?" "That we should settle," she said bluntly. "Offer Maya joint custody. Controlled. Private. Quiet. We limit the damage." His voice dropped into a snarl. "You expect me to share my son with her?" "He's not a trophy, Edward," she replied. "He's a boy. And the court is turning. She's just a maid. No, she's a mother now, and every person watching this believes it." A beat passed, then another. Edward straightened his tie with shaking hands. "No deals," he said coldly. "No compromise. I built this family. You built it on silence. I built it on legacy, and I won't let it end with her." Violet shook her head slowly. "Then you'll burn with it." She walked out, and Edward, for the first time, felt the air thin in his lungs, not from rage, but from fear. That afternoon, Maya sat at the corner table in the legal aid office, the room bustling like a campaign war room. Reporters had begun circling, but David Sherman had drawn the line. "No interviews until after the hearing," he told her. "You're not here for a headline. You're here for a child." "No." Maya nodded, eyes bloodshot, body weary but spirit still upright. Across from her, Julian tapped at his laptop. "We just got 2 new affidavits from ex-staff. One claims Angela was locked in her room for weeks. The other confirms Maya helped deliver Oliver in the hospital." David leaned in. "The court can't ignore this anymore." Maya took a breath. "How do we keep him safe in the meantime?" "We have an emergency motion for full protective custody. The hearing's tomorrow morning. Until then, Tanya's place is legally sound." But Maya still felt that tightness in her chest. That echo of Angela's voice the night before she left. "If something happens to me, take care of him. No matter what it costs." At Tanya's apartment, Oliver sat quietly on the floor, scribbling with crayons. He wasn't drawing superheroes anymore. He was drawing two people, one tall, one small, holding hands in front of a house with a slanted roof. At the bottom he had scrawled 3 words misspelled but clear. Me and Mama. Tanya peeked in. You want a snack, baby? He looked up. Can Maya stay here forever? She sat beside him, brushing hair from his forehead. We're trying to make sure of that. Daddy's mad, he said simply. Tanya hesitated. You scared of him? No, Oliver whispered. But he's scared of her. Tanya blinked. What do you mean? He looked back at the drawing. He's scared she'll make me remember. That night, a black SUV pulled up outside Tanya's building. 2 men in Langston security uniforms stepped out, scanned the surroundings, then returned to the vehicle. From inside the car, a voice spoke. Still watching? Every second. Tell Mr. Langston we found the weakness. They drove off, leaving behind no trace. Back at Langston Holdings, Edward sat alone in his private quarters. He replayed the surveillance clip again, frame by frame, like a man trying to rewrite history through repetition. Each time, the same scene unfolded. Each time, he lost. But his eyes kept falling on one moment right before the footage cut out. Angela looked directly into the camera. Into him, as if she knew this moment would come, and then he noticed it barely visible, almost imperceptible. A second shadow in the hallway. Someone else had been there. He froze, zoomed in, and there just beyond the edge of light was the blurred silhouette of another staff member. Not Maya, someone else. Someone who had vanished before the funeral. His hand trembled. Find them, he whispered, before she does. Back in Tanya's living room, Maya sat curled on the couch with Oliver asleep beside her again. The TV droned quietly in the background, an old black and white movie with a jazz score and far-off war. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. The storm wasn't over. It was only changing shape. And when it came, she knew this time. She wouldn't run. The next morning, the courtroom buzzed like a shaken beehive. The unexpected leak of the surveillance footage had changed everything. Reporters crowded outside in a frenzy of microphones and camera flashes. But inside, the atmosphere was tense, restrained like a battlefield just before the first gunshot. Maya sat quietly, her hands folded, the weight of Oliver's life pressing down on her shoulders like armor. Her lawyer, David Sherman, adjusted his notes at the table beside her. He looked exhausted, but focused. Today's the real turning point, he said softly. If we win the motion for protective custody, it's a domino. Everything falls after that. She nodded. And if we lose? He looked at her gravely. Then we start preparing for war. The judge entered and called the room to order. Across the aisle, Edward Langston sat stoically, flanked by his legal team. His face was calm, but Maya noticed the flicker of fatigue beneath his perfectly combed hair, the subtle tick in his jaw. He was unraveling. They were all unraveling. And yet, Maya could feel it. Something was still missing. One final truth. Midway through the hearing, David stood. Your Honor, we submit a motion to admit a new witness. Unscheduled, yes, but crucial. This person was an employee at the Langston estate and was present the week of Miss Angela Cooper's death. The courtroom stirred. Edward's lawyers shot up. We object. Surprise witnesses are procedurally inappropriate. The judge raised a hand. Is the witness here? David turned. A side door opened, and in stepped a woman, slim, nervous, eyes darting like a deer in a burning forest. She was dressed plainly jeans, a wool coat, worn boots, but her presence drew every eye in the room. Please state your name, the judge instructed. The woman hesitated, then, Imani Carter. Edward's jaw tensed. Maya whispered, I know that name. She worked in the laundry, David said under his breath. Disappeared after Angela's funeral. Imani sat at the witness stand, her hands shaking as she took the oath. David stepped forward. Miss Carter, can you tell the court why you've come forward now? Imani glanced at Edward, then looked down. Because I couldn't live with it anymore. The room stilled. She continued. Angela, she wasn't okay. She'd been trying to leave. She told me. She said she had a place lined up for her and her son, that Maya was going to help. David nodded. And what happened? The night before she was found dead, I heard them fighting. Angela and Mr. Langston. Edward's face flushed, but he didn't speak. She said she was done. Said she didn't care about the threats. That she was going to court. That Oliver deserved better. Imani's voice cracked. And then she said something I'll never forget. David leaned in. What was that? She said. If anything happens to me, it's not an accident. Tell Maya. He's hers if I'm gone. Maya's breath caught. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Edward's lead counsel shot to his feet. Objection. Hearsay completely inadmissible. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Order. David lifted a file. We also submit Miss Carter's written affidavit. Dated and notarized yesterday. Diz. The judge skimmed it quickly. Her expression didn't change, but her eyes hardened. Miss Carter, she said, why didn't you come forward sooner? I was afraid, Imani admitted. Everyone who crossed Mr. Langston lost their jobs. Some disappeared. I didn't want to be next. Judge Reardon nodded. You're safe now. Edward spoke suddenly. His voice, cold and venom-laced, cut through the room. You should be ashamed. Imani's eyes met his. I was. But not anymore. After court adjourned for the day, Maya caught up with Imani in the hallway. They embraced tentatively, then tightly, like two survivors of the same fire. I thought you were gone, Maya said, eyes glistening. I was, Imani whispered. But you brought me back. David stepped beside them. She's the key, Maya. This puts us ahead. Maya looked past him, toward the courthouse doors. Outside, the crowd waited. Microphones. Cameras. Headlines. But all she cared about was one boy, and the truth that now had a name, a voice, and a witness. That evening, back at Langston's estate, Edward stood alone in his study, whiskey in hand, a fireplace roaring. Violet entered silently. You lost today, she said without preamble. He didn't turn. I haven't lost, he murmured. She stepped closer. Your son chose her. The court is leaning. The media's already decided. He looked at the flames. Then it's time to change the story. No. Her brow furrowed. What are you thinking? He turned to her slowly. If they want a war, I'll give them one. He picked up his phone. Dialed. Activate the safe house in Westchester. Get the jet fueled. Tell them I'm taking Oliver out tonight. Violet's expression froze. You'll never get away with that. I don't need to get away with it, he said darkly. I just need to make sure that boy never testifies, never sees her again. She took a step back. You're kidnapping your own son. He stared at her, ice in his veins. I'm protecting my legacy. Back in Tanya's apartment, Maya tucked Oliver into bed. He looked up at her with sleepy eyes. Are we winning? He asked softly. She smiled and kissed his forehead. We're not done yet, she said, but we're close. Then, a quiet knock on the door. Tonya answered. It was Julian, pale, shaken. You need to come with me. Now. What is it? Maya asked. They found Edward's car at a private airstrip, Julian said. Jet's being fueled. We think he's trying to take Oliver out of the country. Tonight. Maya's heart stopped. She looked back at the boy already drifting off to sleep. Not again, she whispered. This time, she wouldn't let him vanish. The car screeched around the corner as the lights of the private airfield came into view, a narrow strip of asphalt, half hidden behind a chain-link fence and tall pine trees. Wind howled through the lot as snow flurries danced in chaotic spirals beneath floodlights. The jet, white and sleek, was already being fueled. Maya sat in the back seat, fists clenched, heart galloping in her chest. He's really doing it, she muttered. He's really going to take him. Julian, behind the wheel, nodded grimly. We have about 10 minutes before they're airborne less if he bribes the tower. What about the cops? Tanya asked from the passenger seat. Didn't we call them? Julian shook his head. Private land. No warrant, no entry. Unless we have someone on the inside. Maya's breath caught. I do. She pulled out her phone and dialed. At the same time, in the cockpit of the Langston jet, Edward stood behind the pilot, eyes fixed on the snowy tarmac. 5 minutes, the pilot said. Weather's pushing in fast. No. Edward nodded. Then looked over his shoulder into the cabin where Oliver sat strapped in, guarded by 2 silent men in black coats. The boy's eyes were wide, frightened, but dry. You lied, Oliver said quietly, his voice barely audible over the engine hum. Edward approached. About what? You said Maya left me. You said she didn't love me. Edward forced a smile. She confused you. That's all. She's not your mother. She is, Oliver replied. You're just mad because she's brave. Nee. Edward's smile vanished. But before he could reply, his phone buzzed. Unknown caller. He nearly declined, but something made him answer. Maya, he said coolly. Still chasing shadows? No, she said, her voice calm and sharp. I'm calling to give you one last chance. He chuckled. A threat? From a maid? No, a warning, she replied. The pilot you're paying off? He's already talking to the feds. The flight manifests flagged. You try to take off. They'll shut you down mid-air. Best case, you're grounded. Worst case, you're charged with felony kidnapping. Edward blinked, his grip tightening on the phone. You're bluffing. Am I? Maya said. Check your messages. A beep on his phone. A video attachment. He opened it. It was the pilot. In a secret recording. Saying, he told me to change the manifest. Said the boy's mother was deceased. But the woman's alive. And in court. I'm not going to prison for this guy. Edward's world stuttered. You had him followed, he whispered. I had him listened to, Maya replied. Like Angela once was. He clenched his jaw. What do you want? To come home with my son, she said simply. And to make you understand that this ends here, tonight. He stared at the cockpit window. The storm outside had grown louder. The lights blurred, and for the first time in his life, Edward Langston felt powerless. Back on the tarmac, the hangar lights flickered as the storm surged. Maya's car skidded to a stop at the side gate. She leapt out, coat flaring behind her, boots crunching across icy gravel. Just as she reached the base of the jet stairs, the door opened. Oliver stood at the top, clutching a small backpack. Behind him, Edward. Maya froze. The guard stepped forward, but Edward raised a hand. Let them pass. The men looked uncertain, but obeyed. Maya took the stairs one at a time, heart pounding. She reached her son and knelt. You okay, baby? Oliver nodded slowly. I knew you'd come. Maya smiled through tears and hugged him tight. Then she looked up at Edward. You're done, she said softly. He gave a hollow laugh. You think this is over? No, Maya said, but your control is. She took Oliver's hand and began to descend. Edward didn't stop them, not because he couldn't, but because he knew if he did, it would be the final nail in the coffin, and he wasn't ready to be buried yet. 30 minutes later, back at the legal aid office, David reviewed the FAA flight report confirming the jet had been grounded and the tower had been alerted about the manifest discrepancy. It's enough, he told Maya. This pushes everything in our favor. The judge will see it as attempted abduction. Maya nodded, holding Oliver close. He doesn't get to just vanish people anymore, she said quietly. No, David replied. Now you make the rules. But across the city, inside a dimly lit cigar lounge, a man in a brown overcoat was handed a manila envelope. Inside, photographs of Maya, her apartment, the school she once taught at, old letters, medical files, documents even she hadn't known had been taken. A voice behind him said, Mr. Langston wants every page, every flaw, every crack. If she has secrets, we find them. He tucked the envelope into his coat and left without a word. Because Edward Langston wasn't retreating. He was reloading, and the final war was just beginning. The next morning was unusually quiet. Not in the world because the world was buzzing louder than ever. Headlines were spreading like wildfire. Billionaire nearly flees country with child amid custody battle. Cable networks filled with experts dissecting the legal implications, with words like emergency jurisdiction and parental alienation flying across the screen. But in Maya's little corner of the world, it was quiet. Too quiet. She sat at Tonia's kitchen table, Oliver beside her scribbling in a coloring book, the scent of pancakes still lingering in the air. The sunlight hit her face gently through the blinds, but even the warmth couldn't chase away the unease in her gut. Something was off. David Sherman walked in holding his phone. The judge has agreed to review all custody documents today, emergency hearing, mid-afternoon. She's calling it a matter of child protection. Maya exhaled slowly. Then it's happening. David nodded. And from what I've heard, she's not happy with Edward. Good, Maya said, trying to sound confident. Let's finish this. But just as she stood, Julian burst through the door, holding a padded envelope and looking pale. You need to see this, he said. Maya opened the envelope slowly. Inside were copies of documents she hadn't seen in years. Medical files from a clinic in South Carolina, old job applications, a sealed juvenile record, and one folded, creased page, an old personal letter she had written during her darkest year. Never mailed. Addressed to Angela but full of confessions. That she once ran away at 16, that she stole from a grocery store to feed herself, that she had battled postpartum depression after her first miscarriage. Maya sat down hard. Where did you get this? She asked. Julian's voice was tight. It was delivered to 3 media outlets this morning. They held the story, said it looked planted, but they're not going to sit on it for long. David took the papers, scanned them. He's trying to destroy your credibility. He went digging, Julian added. Deep. Maya's head spun. The world tilted for just a second, but then she looked at Oliver, who was humming quietly, unaware of the war being waged in his name, and everything inside her steadied. Then let's bring everything to light, she said, before he gets the chance to twist it. That afternoon, the courtroom felt heavier than ever. Reporters were kept at bay, but the tension inside was enough to choke a grown man. Maya sat tall in her seat, chin up, eyes sharp. She wore no makeup, no armor, just truth. Edward Langston, on the other side, looked paler than usual. There were new lines under his eyes. The corners of his mouth pulled slightly downward, like the world was beginning to press in on all sides. Judge Reardon entered on Saturday. This emergency hearing has been convened to address new evidence regarding the safety, legal custody, and personal welfare of Oliver James Langston. Miss Williams, you may proceed. David stood. Your Honor, we are presenting all documentation, including affidavits, surveillance footage, and now, an attempted flight with a minor across state and federal lines. He paused. But before we address Mr. Langston's violations, my client would like to speak, directly, about the materials that were anonymously leaked this morning. The judge raised an eyebrow. You've seen them? Yes, Maya said, rising to her feet, and I'm not going to pretend I'm proud of what's in there. She walked toward the center of the room, her heels quiet against the polished floor. Yes, I ran away when I was a teenager. Yes, I stole food when I was homeless. And yes, I've wrestled with mental health just like millions of Americans have. But none of that makes me a bad woman, and it sure as hell doesn't make me a bad mother. She looked at Edward. I spent my whole life climbing out of the hole life threw me in. And when Angela asked me to help raise her son, I didn't hesitate because I knew what it meant to be forgotten. Her voice cracked. Oliver deserves better than being a pawn in a billionaire's vanity. He deserves love and truth and safety. And no matter what skeletons you dig up about me, you'll never find one that says I didn't care for him. May. Silence filled the courtroom. Then Judge Reardon spoke. Mr. Langston? Edward rose, composed but grim. Your Honor, I will not deny that I attempted to take Oliver out of state. My reasons were born from fear, not cruelty. This situation has spiraled beyond reason. The media, the chaos. It's not safe. The judge's expression didn't change. And your team's recent effort to leak sealed juvenile records and medical history? Was that also about safety? Edward hesitated. Then, his voice dropped. I did what I had to do. The judge leaned forward. No, Mr. Langston, you did what you chose to do, and choices have consequences. She turned her gaze toward the clerk. Prepare the ruling. The next 20 minutes felt like hours. Maya sat frozen, holding Oliver's crayon drawing in her lap. It was crumpled and worn now, but still clear. Me and Mama. She didn't move, didn't blink, and when the judge returned, she stood instinctively, as though gravity had given her permission. In light of the presented evidence, the attempted relocation of a minor, and the consistent testimony from multiple credible sources, this court finds it in the best interest of the child to remove temporary custody from Mr. Langston. A hush fell over the room. Judge Reardon continued. Permanent guardianship of Oliver James Langston shall be awarded to Miss Maya Williams, pending final adoption proceedings. Maya's knees almost buckled. She didn't cry. Not yet. But the breath she let out carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights. Oliver, in the front row, clapped once softly, innocently, like it was just another happy ending in one of his cartoons. And maybe, for once, it was. Outside the courthouse, the wind blew soft and cold. Maya stepped into the light, Oliver at her side, Tonya waiting nearby with open arms. "It's done," she whispered. David placed a hand on her shoulder. "No, it's just begun." And as the cameras flashed, Maya didn't flinch. She wasn't a maid. She wasn't a victim. She was a mother now, and no one, not even a billionaire, could take that from her. The Langston mansion stood cold and quiet, like a great beast gone still. Edward moved slowly through the marbled corridors, his loafers echoing on the polished floors. No more staff greeted him. No guards flanked his sides. The legal team had stopped returning calls that morning. Violet had left days ago. Even the housekeeper who'd worked here since his father's days had quietly handed in her keys and walked out without looking back. The once proud empire of Edward Langston wasn't falling. It had already fallen, but he refused to believe it. He entered the grand salon, where sunlight filtered through stained glass, spilling soft reds and golds across the velvet furniture. Above the fireplace hung the infamous Langston family portrait, a towering oil painting that captured 3 generations of money, silence, and control. Edward stared at it for a long time. Then, without warning, he picked up the fire poker and swung. The painting cracked. Again, and again, until his grandfather's smug face was ripped open and the canvas drooped like a wounded flag. His hands trembled, because beneath all the fury, beneath the headlines and courtroom disgrace, there remained something worse. A had lost. Not just the court battle, not just custody. A had lost control. And that, to Edward Langston, was unforgivable. Meanwhile, across town, life began to feel quieter. Maya stood in front of a small easel in her new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom in a peaceful, tree-lined neighborhood far from Langston's shadow. She dipped a brush into blue paint and guided it gently across the canvas. Behind her, Oliver was humming. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, building a Lego ship. "Can we paint together?" he asked. Maya smiled. "Right after dinner. Can we have grilled cheese?" "Of course, baby." He grinned, then returned to his spaceship. Maya paused, watching him, really watching him. No guards, no court orders, no threats hanging in the air like smoke. Just a boy, finally safe. She turned back to the painting. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was something, 2 hands reaching across an invisible line, not quite touching, not quite apart. Angela's hands. And hers. It wasn't finished, but maybe that was okay. Maybe healing didn't arrive in grand gestures, but in the quiet things, the grilled cheese sandwiches, the paint strokes, the bedtime stories read aloud beneath a thrifted lamp. Later that night, Maya received a message from David. "We need to talk. Come by tomorrow. Bring Oliver." She stared at the screen, unsure. Things were finally settling. What now? But her instinct said, go. The next day, in the small, windowed office of David Sherman, Maya sat across from her lawyer, Oliver beside her playing with a handheld puzzle. David placed a thick folder on the table. "There's something you need to see," he said. Maya opened it and froze. Inside were financial ledgers, account transfers, anonymous donations, from an untraceable shell corporation, all linked to a children's literacy fund Maya had worked with years ago, and Angela Cooper's name was attached to the earliest donation. "What is this?" Maya asked. David took a breath. "It's Langston's money." Maya's eyes narrowed. "What?" "We traced it back. Quiet donations, year after year, always linked to community projects Maya volunteered at, always shielded behind layers of fake identities." She stared at the documents. "He was watching us?" she whispered. David nodded. "And maybe trying to rewrite the past." Maya shook her head. "He doesn't get to fix what he broke with a checkbook. There's more." He opened a side envelope and handed her a photo. It was faded, black and white. Angela, Edward, and a much younger version of Maya. She was maybe 18. At a community event. Standing close, Edward's arm was behind Angela, but his eyes were on Maya. A cold chill swept over her. "I don't remember this." You blocked it, David said softly, but the camera didn't. Maya put the photo down. Her voice was steady but low. He knew I'd come back one day. And he prepared. David leaned back. You beat him, Maya. But his games go deeper than custody. If you want real peace, you need to uncover everything. What happened to Angela? What secrets he buried? She looked at Oliver, now curled asleep on the couch. I don't care about his secrets, she said. I care about keeping my son safe. David paused. Then let me ask you something. Maya turned to him. If someone told you there's one last thread to pull, one that might explain everything, would you do it? She didn't answer immediately, because the answer wasn't easy. Because peace came at a price, and she wasn't sure how much more truth she could afford. But finally, she said, yes. David nodded. Then get some rest. And why? Because tomorrow, he said, we go back to where it all started. And miles away, in a private room under an assumed name, Violet Durham opened her laptop and began recording a message. Angela Cooper didn't die because she was weak, she said, her voice quiet. She died because she was brave. She looked into the camera. I was part of it. She reached into her bag, pulled out a flash drive, and slid it across the desk. To whoever finds this, this is the truth. The rain returned as if summoned, gray and steady, dripping down the courthouse steps and soaking the sidewalks in quiet rhythm. Maya stood beneath a worn umbrella, watching the world blur behind streaks of water. Her hands trembled, but not from the cold. The flash drive sat in her coat pocket like a weight. Heavy. Silent. David stood beside her, motionless. Violet gave it to a contact at a local news outlet, he said. Said it was a contingency, a way to sleep at night. Macon. Maya didn't speak, because she already knew. This was it. The final door, the one Angela had died trying to open, back in David's office. The atmosphere turned surgical. The blinds were closed. Phones silenced. Oliver stayed with Tanya for the afternoon, safe, away from what was coming. David inserted the flash drive into his encrypted laptop. The folder was labeled with a single word, Veritas. Inside were 3 subfolders. 1. Security tapes. 2. Voice recordings. San. Contracts and correspondence. David opened the tapes first. Maya leaned forward, heart pounding like footsteps echoing in a steel corridor. The first video was grainy, dated 2 years earlier. Angela, standing in the Langston foyer, faced off with Edward. Her voice was calm but sharp, clipped with quiet fury. I won't keep lying for you, Angela said. He deserves to know who he is. Edward's voice, cold and dismissive. He deserves to be protected from you. You mean from the truth? He stepped toward her. You forget your place. No, she snapped. I remember it too well. I cleaned your blood off that bathroom floor after your father beat you with a belt. I stayed when others quit. I saw your son born because you were too drunk to make it to the hospital. He slapped her. On camera. David paused the video. Maya's breath hitched. She whispered. I didn't know it ever got violent. David only nodded. Keep watching. The next video was shorter. Angela, sitting in a room that looked like the staff quarters. She spoke directly to the camera. If you're watching this, it means I'm gone, or running, or worse. And it means Edward's trying to erase me. She smiled sadly, but he can't erase her. Not Maya. Not what she gave Oliver. She held up a photograph, one Maya hadn't seen before. A picture of Maya cradling Oliver as a newborn. A quiet moment. Maya's eyes closed. Oliver's tiny hand on her collarbone. Angela looked back at the lens. She loved him like he was her own, because he was. Maya turned away. Tears welled, warm and silent. David opened the second folder. Voice recordings. Dozens. Some muffled, some barely audible. But then one clicked open, and Maya heard her own voice. You ever feel like you're waiting to be erased? She had said once to Angela, years ago, in the laundry room. Like the world's got one big eraser, and you're next? Angela's laughter followed. That's why you make yourself unforgettable, baby girl. That's how you survive in their world. The final folder was labeled Contracts and Correspondence. It contained scanned letters, legal memos, some in Violet's handwriting, others in Edward's. The most damning one, a non-disclosure agreement Angela had refused to sign. Scrawled across the top were her handwritten words, "This isn't silence. It's surrender. And I'm not done yet." Maya stared at it for a long time. "I can't believe she saved all this," she murmured. David nodded. She knew one day someone would have to pick up where she left off. He closed the laptop. "And now it's you." That night, Maya lay awake, listening to Oliver's breathing in the room next door. The storm whispered against the windows. She thought about Angela, about everything that had been stolen, hidden, buried under decades of wealth and shame, and she thought about what to do next. She could go to the press, blow the whole thing wide open, but at what cost? Would Oliver be safe from the storm that followed? She could stay quiet, let Edward fade, let justice be partial, but that's not what Angela would have done. It's not what Maya could live with. The next morning, she walked into the offices of WBEZ Radio Chicago, holding the flash drive in one hand and her truth in the other. The producer looked up from his desk. "You're the woman from the custody case." "I'm more than that," Maya replied. He gestured to a seat. "What's this about?" She placed the drive on the table. "It's about how the truth gets hidden behind money." He eyed the drive. "You sure you want this out there?" "Once it's in the air, it never comes back down." Maya sat tall. "I don't want it back." Within 48 hours, a primetime investigative special aired. The Langston tapes, Power, Silence, and the Price of Truth. Clips of Angela's recordings, surveillance footage, leaked documents. The nation watched and gasped. Protests formed outside Langston Holdings. Sponsors pulled out. Board members resigned. Edward Langston was subpoenaed, not for custody, but for conspiracy, obstruction, and wrongful death investigation. In a quiet park 3 weeks later, Maya sat on a bench, watching Oliver chase ducks around a pond. The air was crisp, the sky soft with autumn gold. A woman passed by and paused. "You're Maya Williams, right?" Maya smiled gently. "Yes, ma'am." The woman nodded. "You did the right thing. That's real courage." She walked on, and for the first time in what felt like years, Maya breathed deep. No fear, no secrets, just air. She looked up at the sky. "Angela," she whispered, "we did it." The federal courthouse downtown stood taller than ever, its granite walls seeming to absorb the tension in the city. Reporters swarmed outside its steps, flashbulbs popping like firecrackers, while live feeds streamed across every major network. The state of Illinois v. Edward Langston had officially begun. Inside, the mood was different, sterile, almost funereal. As Maya stepped into the gallery, escorted by David, every head turned. Some whispered. Some offered silent nods of support. But Edward? He didn't even look at her. He sat at the defendant's table, stoic as a statue, flanked by a new team of criminal defense attorneys. His once immaculate suits had been traded for a somber gray. His eyes looked darker, sleepless, haunted, but the arrogance still lingered, clinging to him like an expensive cologne. Maya took her seat quietly. Her fingers grazed the edge of her purse, where she kept a laminated photo of Angela and Oliver Angela's last birthday, cupcakes in hand, Oliver smeared with frosting. This was for them, not revenge. Restoration. The prosecution began with thunder. Federal Prosecutor Maria Delgado didn't waste time. "This case is not about wealth, or status, or parental rights," she said, voice crisp and firm. "It's about what happens when power silences the people who can't afford to scream." She walked past Edward, slow and steady. "The evidence is clear. A pattern of manipulation, intimidation, and cover-ups that cost at least one woman her life and nearly robbed a child of his future." Then came the exhibits, the video recordings, the flash drive, Angela's final messages, each presented like bricks in a wall, closing in around Edward Langston. Maya didn't cry. She'd already cried for Angela. Now, she simply watched the house of cards fall. Edward's defense team fought hard. They painted Angela as emotionally unstable. They tried to discredit Maya's past, bringing up her runaway years, her sealed juvenile record, even old therapy notes obtained through questionable means. But it didn't land. because Maya didn't flinch. She took the stand and looked the jury in the eyes when she said, "Yes, I was broken once, but I healed, and I loved that boy like breath itself. That's what matters." When asked why she came forward after so many years in the shadow of wealth and fear, she answered with something Angela once told her. Because silence never saves anyone. 3 weeks into the trial, something unexpected happened. Violet Durham appeared. She took the stand, wearing a black blazer, her once flawless face now lined with something resembling grief. "I was part of the machine," she admitted. "I buried documents. I paid off staff. I lied to protect the name Langston." "Why did you stop?" the prosecutor asked. Violet's voice cracked. "Because I watched a boy cry for a woman he called mother, and I couldn't live with that anymore." She looked directly at Maya then. "I couldn't live with what we did to her." It was the first time Maya had ever seen Violet look human. Closing arguments came fast. The prosecution reminded the jury that no one, not even billionaires, was above the law. The defense warned of emotional manipulation and trial by media. And then the jury vanished behind a door, taking the weight of justice with them. Outside the courtroom, the world waited. Inside a cafe across the street, Maya sat with Oliver in her lap, sipping lukewarm coffee while he played with a toy train on the table. "Are we going to win again?" he asked. Maya smiled. "We already did." He looked up, curious. "How?" "Because you're safe," she whispered. "That's all I ever wanted." Her phone buzzed. David's name lit up the screen. She answered quietly. "They're back," he said. They returned to the courtroom, each heartbeat louder than the last. The foreman stood, paper in hand. "In the matter of State of Illinois v. Edward Langston," Maya gripped the side of the bench. "We find the defendant guilty on all counts." Gasps, tears, silence. Edward closed his eyes, but his face betrayed no emotion. Not a flinch. Not even when the judge sentenced him to 35 years without parole. The gavel fell, and just like that, the ghost of Edward Langston was sealed behind steel and law. A month later, a bronze plaque was installed at the newly renamed Angela Cooper Youth Center in Bronzeville. Maya stood beside it, Oliver's hand in hers, while a local councilwoman delivered a speech to a crowd of city residents and survivors of systemic abuse. The plaque read, "In memory of Angela Cooper, a mother, a truth-teller, a fighter. Justice may sleep, but it never dies." Maya stepped up to the mic. She didn't prepare a speech. She didn't need to. "I wasn't born brave," she said softly, "but I met someone who taught me how to be." She looked at Oliver, "And now, I get to pass that on." Applause filled the square, and somewhere, she could feel Angela smiling. That night, as the city lights twinkled beneath the darkened sky, Maya tucked Oliver into bed. He clutched his new favorite storybook, one she'd written just for him. A story about a little boy who found his voice, and the woman who never stopped fighting to help him use it. "Will you read it again?" he asked sleepily. "Of course," Maya said, settling beside him. Her voice filled the room, low and soothing, as the pages turned. Outside, Chicago pulsed on. A city of shadows and hope, of broken things mended by love. And for once finally of peace, spring arrived without fanfare, just the soft rustling of tulips pushing through thawed soil, and the scent of fresh rain lingering in the air. The city was still itself, buzzing, moving, building, but for Maya and Oliver, everything had changed. They now lived in a small bungalow on the edge of Lincoln Park, not far from the lake. The porch creaked when you stepped on it. The floors weren't level, but it was theirs. And more importantly, it was home. No more hiding. No more courts. No more wondering when the sky might fall. Maya stood at the kitchen sink one morning, sipping coffee as sunlight painted gold across the cabinets. Oliver was at the table, half lost in a drawing, his tongue peeking from the side of his mouth, focused as only children could be. "Guess what today is?" Maya asked, setting her mug down. He looked up, eyes curious. "Grilled cheese day?" She laughed. "No, silly. It's the day we mail out our book." Oliver's face lit up. "The one about me?" "The very one." She grabbed the padded envelope from the counter, already addressed to a children's publisher in New York. The manuscript inside, "The Boy with the Loudest Heart," written by Maya Williams. inspired by a little boy who once found his voice in the most unlikely place. "Can I put the stamp on?" he asked. "You better." At the post office, the clerk smiled kindly at them. "First time publishing?" Maya nodded. "It won't be the last." As they walked back to the car, Oliver reached up and slipped his hand into hers. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. There was a peace in that silence that once felt impossible. Later that week, Maya visited Angela's grave for the first time in months. It was quiet in the cemetery, birds chirping gently overhead, tree branches swaying in the breeze. She knelt, brushing a leaf off the headstone. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "He's safe, he's happy, and he knows your name." She placed a small bouquet of white tulips at the base. "And Edward," she said quietly, "he can't hurt anyone anymore." "Mar." She paused, eyes stinging, voice lower now. "I miss you." A single tear slid down her cheek. Then she stood and walked away slowly, each step lighter than the one before. In prison, Edward Langston sat in the corner of the recreation yard, untouched and unspoken to. The other inmates gave him a wide berth, not out of respect, but out of disinterest. He no longer mattered. Once the architect of legacies, now just another number. He watched pigeons flap across the gray sky and closed his eyes, not in regret but in defiance. He would never apologize, but it no longer mattered, because history had already moved on, and it didn't ask for his permission. 6 months later, Maya stood on a small stage at the Chicago Public Library, reading an excerpt from her newly published children's book. A crowd of parents and children sat before her, and in the front row, Oliver beamed, legs swinging from his seat. The passage read, "He didn't roar like the lions. He didn't bark like the dogs, but his heart thundered like a drum," and someone finally heard it. The audience applauded gently. Afterward, a little girl came up to her, holding a copy of the book tight against her chest. "My brother doesn't talk much," she said, "but he liked your story. He said it felt like home." Maya bent down, tears warming her eyes. "That means more than you know." She looked at the girl's mother, who nodded with understanding. Two women, two strangers, bound by something invisible and unshakable. Truth. That night, Maya lay in bed beside Oliver, who had dozed off during their third reading of The Boy with the Loudest Heart. The room was still, filled with only the hum of the street lamp outside and the occasional car rolling by. She stared at the ceiling, hands behind her head. So much had happened, so much had broken, but here they were whole again. She whispered into the quiet, "Thank you, Angela." A breeze stirred the curtains, brushing cool air across her skin. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe something else. Either way, it felt like an answer. 18 months later, the Angela Cooper Foundation opened its first scholarship program for women of color pursuing social work and education. The fund was backed by small donations across the country: teachers, nurses, single mothers, retired pastors. One donor wrote, "I was once a Maya, and I never had an Angela. This is for all the women who fought with nothing and made something." And Maya? She kept writing. She visited schools. She gave quiet talks at shelters. She raised Oliver with patience, grace, and just enough grilled cheese. And every year, on Angela's birthday, they would sit beneath the oak tree in Lincoln Park and read a story out loud, any story. Because Maya believed that justice was not a finish line. It was a practice, a living, breathing thing built in the quiet moments, in the gentle defiance of telling the truth even when no one believed you, and in the fierce, unbreakable love between a child and the woman who refused to be erased.